Okay, so we are being recorded and we are being live streamed. So thanks, everybody. Thanks again for participating and joining us, and all the back and forth we've had over the last couple of weeks has been good, I think, and healthy for the group to see everybody's point of view. I've tried to capture the various issues, and my last email yesterday provided some concepts or some I guess they're the options. But I think before we get into the introductory paragraph, I think maybe the easier discussion would be discussion about certification of zoning officials. And Caroline put forward a paragraph about certification. And as I mentioned to her, this is not something I'm personally in favor of, as I don't see the need, but it was also pointed out to me that by including something about training of zoning folks, planners, it starts addressing sort of more of a personnel issue versus a policy issue, and therefore it doesn't seem to be really relevant to what we're doing here. And so I'd like to hear everybody's who has an opinion about this, to see whether we in fact want to include something about that or not.
Max, I'm in a Zoom meeting. What do you need, hon?
Any takers?
Can you put the language on the screen possibly, so we can?
Yes, let me find it. Yep.
David, I would suggest that we do have one issue in the state, which is that there are no programs that train somebody in planning.
Can I just comment on that? Francis, you're absolutely correct. But can you all hear me? Is anybody?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Screwed this up so many times. You're correct. However, the truth of the matter is you don't need a degree in planning to be a certified planner. And there are many certified planners in the state that don't have that. That said, I think David's right in the sense that I'm not sure, although I think there is, and I've worked on this with some people, it's very important to have some kind of education, greater education within the state. I'm not sure. I think this is a policy document as opposed to a who should everybody have on staff kind of. I mean, there are a lot of planners in this state who, if they had to be certified, would not be working in the jobs they're in. And I'll add one other thing, maybe controversial, maybe not. I know I'm a much better planner because my background is in lots of other things other than planning, because planning is a thing that brings all different disciplines together. And again, while I have my thoughts on that role for what we're working on, but I'll get into that later, I'm not sure that for staffing, I think there should be either statewide minimum qualifications or I guess it doesn't, for the purposes of this document, I don't know that it matters. I don't think that this is really where it belongs, although I do think it is an important, I think it's a very important issue to be taken up, but I don't think this is the right venue.
I apologize. I'm having technical difficulties here. I'm trying to restore. I thought I was sharing, and I don't know if I am sharing anything.
It's up, yeah, we can see it.
You are, David.
You can see okay. Then I don't know how to unshare it. That's a different problem. So which do you see? Do you see my just background or do you see a document?
The Word documents up there.
Okay, good. Let me bring back Carolyn's there. So that's the email. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So here's the certification statement that she was recommending. And do people feel strongly that this needs to be in there? Because I just think it's like a scope creep that's not necessary. Carolyn, if you want to speak to this, or if you're here. Don't know that she is.
I'd like to remove it. I don't like the fact that the zoning enforcement officials are, under whether Public Act 2129, I think has a lot of flaws in it already. So adding another layer to me is a mistake, especially anybody who's tried to hire somebody at a mid-level or higher level planning position, trying to find that individual. I get called all the time from municipalities looking for staff. And I'm like, well, I have lots of people that just started and are just learning, but to get somebody who has experience, and then on top of that, somebody who may be or may not be AEICP certified, it's in a whole nother ballgame at that.
Carolyn, I think you joined. I just saw you pop up here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you like to advocate here?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that the points everyone's been raising about the difficulty of getting certified planners is, I would like to kind of work together to see if we can figure out a way to address that and at the same time address the issue of making sure that we have really strong ambassadors for form-based codes who understand the regulations and put them forward in a way that people embrace them. And so that's, how do we do that? Like, I think a while ago it was put up, the idea was put up that maybe we can recommend a track to certification at the state level. And maybe that track doesn't require everyone to be certified who has had professional experience. But I do think and I also am not sure that the argument that there aren't enough planners, take that back. The fact that there aren't enough planners might be why we need this as well, because if we have people who are licensed, maybe there's a demand, then people will actually go through the process of getting the certification so that they can work as licensed planners, just like if you have a plumber or something. Maybe that will actually generate interest in the profession if there is some kind of state track for certification. I don't think we want to make it burdensome in any way. And if other people have another idea for how to address this problem where you have the attorneys sitting in because the planners are not always versed in the latest recommendations, how do you keep that training up? How do you keep the planners, give us resource for the planners to have, sort of in conjunction with that state planning office, just something we can do because there is this problem that exists and how do we solve it? And I'm not sure it exists so much in the bigger communities as much as in the smaller communities where you do have trouble finding planners, but I don't think then we should not all planners are equal. And I think the certification, some kind of certification helps create, gives a community of planners who can work together. That's all.
I just don't know if it belongs in a model code recommendations since it's not really it seems to be less of a policy issue.
Yeah. I'm only thinking of it with the fact that if these model code regulations, once they get passed, and if people are proposing them in a way they don't understand how to propose them, then basically all the work we've done is for moot. So that's the way I'm thinking about it, is maybe there's a lighter way we could include something about, or maybe there's another way to do it without doing certification, but something so that when these go out into the world, that they're conveyed in a very positive way and they're conveyed in a way that is effective. So
But I see
that's all I'm talking about, is that we want these to get accepted by people on many levels. And It's not going to happen if the people who are proposing them don't have a strong idea or a clear idea of how they can best be used. So I don't know. I mean, for the larger cities, I don't think we have any problem. It's really for the smaller cities where, just like you say, it's hard to get planners, and sometimes there are many, and it's not just for one town. You sometimes have one planner working for 12 or 15 towns. And if they're giving the wrong idea to 12 or 15 towns, that's 12 or 15 towns that could have used the form-based codes that won't. So how do we address that is basically the issue.
Well, I
Maybe-
think this document begins to address that in other ways. We talk about, there's training for commission members. There's discussion about support from the COGS. So these are all the ways that you would educate, disseminate the value.
Maybe then
And-
include training for the municipal planners or something then, the ones who want it. Or maybe there's something, or the community, maybe we open that up a little bit so that people can work together to kind of understand the codes. So maybe it's not just the zoning commission, but the community and the planners.
I don't know, anybody else have anything?
I mean, I think the reality, I don't know, the reality of this is that we still have 169 different municipalities, right? So us having model suggestions, they still have to be adopted locally in order to be implemented. Unless what we're working on then gets adopted and overrides local zoning, which again it's not particularly popular, right? So I think our task, at least in terms of the way that it has been, that I understand that it's been posed to us, is to provide templates that municipalities can review, that they can say, oh my gosh, you're saving me a load, kind of doing this work as each individual 169 different municipalities. We think that there's value here. Let's try to adopt it locally. But that process still has to be enacted. So, I think that doing the training at the COG level is probably the most efficient, effective way to do this. If they certainly support what it is that we come up with. But I mean, I have to say, as a certified planner, I don't need another burden added to, what it is that I'm doing. If we want to suggest that, yes, Yukon Clear should add this within their menu of options that they provide in terms of, annual training available both to commissioners who, oh, by the way, are the ones who are going to have to adopt these changes, in addition to staff. I mean, I think that's certainly fine, but, but I just feel like, we already have enough credits that we have to maintain at this point. And with the Casio stuff, it's just an additional, again, it's an additional layer of, I don't know, what are we up to now? If somebody's Casio certified and AICP certified, AICP is like 24 credits over 2 years. The Casio adds another 16 for every 2 years. It's just, where do we draw the line?
Francis?
I understand Caroline's concern about municipalities using at considerable expense legal counsel during planning and zoning commission meetings. It's a real issue. I don't think that certifying the planners will result in a dial back of that, because so many municipalities in the states, generally governments in Connecticut, are extremely liability averse. And no matter how educated and certified you are, if you're not a lawyer, they will treat you as not a lawyer and will most likely continue to bring the lawyers in. So I'm not sure it actually addresses that, unfortunately.
Other comments? Leslie?
Okay, for those of you who have known me for a while know I've been practicing in Connecticut. I am certified. I've been practicing in Connecticut for decades at this point. And I can tell you that I still get people saying, for starters, things like, well, where's the zoning enforcement officer? He should be here. Where is our lawyer? He should be here. I get comments like, well, we need someone who knows about these things. This is the kind of thing that, again, yes, I'm a certified planner. I went through the motions. I said this at a meeting early on. It's, first of all, it's not that hard to get certified. I venture to say most, if not everybody on this Zoom has probably had enough experience to qualify to sit for the exam. It's not, and I'm not saying you have to, I'm saying that the barrier is not, I think, what is being stated here. The barrier is really, I think when push comes to shove, I think the barrier is extraneous issues. If you walk in and you know your stuff, or you can find it in the regulations, you're as useful at a meeting as anybody else, or more useful. It's not an argument against certification. It just is, I think people get tangled up in it, and it's a frustrating topic.
Maybe we should just sort of take like a straw poll here to see. I'm trying to figure out where I've messed up my screen, so things are all disconnected. I apologize for that. I'm looking for the reactions, and I'm not finding them. Mute. Darn it.
Sorry.
If you're looking to stop share, it should be on the top.
No, I got stop share. Okay, now let me see if I have reactions back. Oh, here it is. Let me just change my view again to gallery view, and so if how about we do this? Thumbs up if you'd like to see the so you know the motion to insert language about certification. Use your thumbs up reaction.
Before we even do this, David, can we just pull back? Because it seems like most people don't. Is it okay if we just include that piece about the training then? If I'm the only one putting forward the idea of certification, just hearing what people have said, I think that doesn't sound like a great idea from my perspective. So maybe we don't, anyway.
Well, what does training mean? I mean, does it mean more CEUs? You know,
Can that be defined later? I mean, I don't
okay,
know.
more comment.
Yeah.
Steve.
So I mean, I think the big picture thing is nobody, no matter how well trained you are, you're not going to be well versed on every new topic. So if you have not had any experience with form-based codes, for example, you need to educate yourself on form-based codes. I can think of an example. We were like right now, our commission, every time we get an application and they want to see every site have solar panels and every low impact development standard they can apply. So we're always like, okay, but what does that actually mean? Is it what's feasible from a construction standpoint? What can you do and not do? So we're educating ourselves and educating our commission on what's practical and what's feasible on those kind of things. Same with, we're actually 3/4 of the way through an adoption of our new zoning regulations, and it's got all our, you know, multifamily and urban areas all have a form-based element to it. So I was no form-based guru, and I'm still not, but we learned and we educated ourselves along the way. If you're a certified planner with your continuing ed credits, you're taking classes and seminars and going to things and learning about things. So you're educating yourself and learning new things along the way. To state the obvious seems to be a little redundant in my opinion.
Yeah, I you know, as an architect, I'm required by the state to get CEUs, but it's very well defined, you know, what I need them in, and it's established in regulations, and I just and it's part of the licensure statute. So I'm not sure. Sean, do you have some other comments?
I think this language probably doesn't fit right where we're talking about it, but I think the issue is not with planners like Steve or Leslie or Emmeline or any of the other planners on this call. It's the ones that I think this, maybe is touching on standards of practice. And the truth is there's a lot of variability that in that with just as there is with planning commissioners. So that's all I want to say.
To me, this is an issue for consumer protection if we want to get, into certification, and it's a whole different avenue, or licensure or registration or something like that. It's very much beyond our scope, nor do I want to suggest to UConn, certainly without them being present here, that we think that they need to run a program. I mean, I don't think we're qualified to be able to tell them what to do from an educational perspective. And not to mention, the costs associated with, standing up a new program and all the rest. So I think I'm going to go back to reactions. If I think if we could, thumbs up if you would like to see certification and or training included. Please use your thumbs up. Carolyn, I thank you for your efforts on this and your advocacy. I just don't think we'll move forward with this particular suggestion, but thank you. I think now we need to get into the other topic, which is a hot topic here, and it has to do with the third paragraph. I did write this email yesterday, and which includes this. Oh wait, I need to share, don't I? Yes. All right, so does everybody see my screen? No. Now. Can you see my this? Let me
see
your
Outlook.
Yeah. Let me get the Word document back up. Okay, can you see the Word document now? And now you see there's the email again. Do you see that?
I just have only seen the email.
But okay, the introduction P3 options, is that what's up there?
No, Caroline's email. So
Caroline's email.
Weird. Okay, let me try to go back. And stop share. How about now?
Yep.
Yep, you can see it.
Thank you. So the paragraph further, this is the current language. Marissa yesterday provided this sort of edit, which kind of, I think, softened, I guess, to a degree, the message. And I, in my bullet point here, suggested one other, a further change by removing the words formally here and unconstitutional here. It basically reads, reinforce the patterns of economic and racial segregation established by state and federal policy. I don't want to, I felt the unconstitutional was a problem, and I can't remember who commented on that earlier. Was it Steve? I'm not sure. Earlier email today about the constitutionality. I'm no expert in those things, and nor do I want, so therefore, without being a constitutional expert, I don't want to opine on that topic. And by removing formally, it's just sort of saying that there are some policies that tend to reinforce patterns of economic and racial segregation, which is, I don't know how controversial that is. Maybe it is. So I'm suggesting that as a potential change, but otherwise we could delete entirely. We are kind of up against it with our deadline, so we need to get a document issued for the December meeting, and Ashley could comment, but it's the deadline's rapidly approaching, and we have the holidays next week, and we don't have any other planned meetings. So I think we really have to resolve this here. So open for conversation.
Okay, I can start just by sort of revisiting the conversation from the October meeting. And I think that the suggestion was really just to bring some sort of acknowledgement into this document. Again, this is not a bill, it's a report. And we want to provide our observations, our suggestions, recommendations, and I think part of that can include a reflection on what the document is doing. And just, thinking big picture, Connecticut is extremely segregated. We have not become less segregated following the passage of the 1968 Civil Rights Act. And I think that the directives through this public act are in part meant to address that to some degree. And I think including just some level of acknowledgement that model codes can be a tool for helping municipalities to address a legacy of segregation, and that also they're just a piece of the puzzle. It's not going to do everything, right? So an acknowledgement of the opportunity and the limitation. So I think there can be definitely a massaging of the language around that, but just, eliminating it altogether because it causes, someone some degree of discomfort, I don't think is a good argument, or, because we think it might annoy someone somewhere. Robert?
Robert.
Thank you. So when looking at this, I guess here's where my suggestion is after reading it and thinking about it. I don't know how many members of the commission are aware of some of my background, but I served for 7 terms as state representative and been the recipient of several of these reports. I appreciate that obviously we could make recommendations what model codes could do. As you know, I brought to this commission ideas that we should be greener. So a model code could also help fight climate change, and a model code could do lots of other things and maybe support local food production. And a model code maybe could deal with, our unhealthy situation by getting people to walk more. But I come back to the original charge of this group was to really look at the creation of a model code. I think, as others in the emails have said, that this is sort of distraction. We also had, other than the last meeting when someone said, oh, I think that we should, and I respect people's opinions on that, put this in, we never had anyone provide evidence to what degree zoning has contributed to this. It's not just zoning that has contributed to the racial and economic segregation we have in this state. It's been redlining, it's been lots of other policies that's gone from there. I'd point out, I actually live in one of the few towns in Connecticut with no zoning. Now, the town is overwhelmingly white, over 90-something% white. There is no zoning here. It's generally all single family because there is no infrastructure here that allows for aggressive development of multifamily. And then finally, my hat as a former legislator, if you want to draw attention to this report, keep this in because it will draw attention. I don't know if that will be good intentions. I think some of the strengths of this report, to me, the single strongest thing that we're recommending is saying, state of Connecticut, you got to belly up to the bar and you have to create a resource center for our towns and municipalities so they know where to go. I think that that is if just that happened, that would be a fantastic thing because it doesn't exist at the moment. We're saying to 169 municipalities and zoning commissions, you're kind of on your own. And I think it would be great that if commissioners knew I could pick up the phone and call an office under OPM or wherever it's placed that could say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Is there some information out there? And someone says, okay, you're a little town down in Fairfield County did this, and a little town in Eastern Connecticut did this, and maybe in Litchfield County, you should do that. I think that that is a fantastic recommendation that I support. And as for all these reasons, my suggestion is that the paragraph just be deleted. Thanks.
Leslie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. Been thinking about this a lot. And I think to start with, to take off on what Marissa said, first of all, I don't think that we're looking to build a document that is weak and that people won't look at. The less controversial it is, I'm not saying we make it more controversial, but the less controversy in anything, the less anybody's going to look at it. So I just want to start there. Codes have power and they lead to results, for better or worse. And if we can't all agree on that, we're in deeper trouble than maybe we think. Our charge in part is to recommend a process and goals that can result in positive change and be helpful tools for Connecticut municipalities to consider, to adopt, or not to adopt. In doing this, we really have to take responsibility for those results. And we need to not only take responsibility for the results in the future, but we need to understand what the results of past decisions have been so that we are wiser in making our decisions. To do otherwise, in my opinion, would be reckless and irresponsible at worst, and frankly, flaccid and ineffectual at best. We have to accept the responsibility for carrying out the first step in developing model language that any Connecticut municipality can accept in whole or in part, or reject it in whole or in part. While the ultimate positive or negative results of our work and that of our successors is not guaranteed, we are responsible for setting the stage for moving Connecticut forward with regard to land use. That's what we're responsible for doing here. That doesn't mean that it doesn't affect other things. To influence the realm of our charge, we need to recognize that the governance of land use is but one element of a Venn diagram, my very favorite shape, that molds formally and informally, justly and unjustly, how all Connecticut citizens live. We are not here as elected representatives. We are here in some cases, we are here as experts. In some cases, we are here as interested parties. In some cases, we are here to make sure bad things don't happen for where we are. I mean, it's, we all think we all volunteered for this. So we all have some level of interest in what we're doing here. To deny that land use as only one force, but a mighty force nonetheless, has had a powerful and often deliberate role in making Connecticut one of the most segregated states in the Union would be reckless. If we cannot recognize that our work here is but one circle in that Venn diagram of social, political, economic, food insecurity, environmental, race and class segregation, then we fail before we've begun. Acknowledgement of these challenges is the least that we can do and should be able to agree on.
Sean, thank you, Leslie.
I wholeheartedly agree with Leslie, and I won't add much because I won't say it as eloquently. So thank you, Leslie. Only to say that no report, no study is ahistoric, and this is occurring within the history of our exclusionary past and present. And it seems irresponsible to me not to include the context in which the state lives in terms of land use.
Thank you, Sean. Francis?
Thanks. I think we need to get back to what the impacts of zoning actually are, and really drill down to the local. We do not have evidence that this is resulting in the outcomes we are seeing. You can look at municipalities without zoning and you see almost identical patterns in those municipalities. There are a lot of factors that introduce residential patterns in this country, not government policy, also the market, corporate activity, and we haven't even spoken to that. And I think that is a big omission. Also, it's beyond our charge. This really could become an all-encompassing history of the world if we decided to go that way. If we want to address this, I would suggest we be substantially more comprehensive than a 3 or 4 sentence paragraph. We might want to go into several pages. We'll also run out our time. The other challenge I see in this, and I think we are not looking it straight in the face, is that there is nothing in form-based codes that will address, without some specification in there, economic, racial, or ethnic segregation. They were not designed for that purpose. They were not designed to promote housing affordability. In fact, if you look at the most popular template for form-based codes, the SMART code, only provisions for housing affordability are as an afterthought, an add-in module. So if we are saying we're here to save Connecticut by form-based codes from segregation, well, that's not the right tool. The real issue is not form-based codes. The issue is more detail, and we haven't even spoken to that in our recommendations. So there's a lack of alignment between the sentence and the rest of what we're talking about. It's almost a non sequitur. So I do have concerns not only about scope creep and going beyond our legislative mandate, but the fact that it's not consistent with the rest of what we're talking about.
Thank you, Francis. Pete?
So I'll just start by saying my personal recommendation would be using Marissa's revised language with David's restructuring, the removing of the formally unconstitutional. I think that's a really good, I hope, consensus of acknowledging what is, I think, a non-controversial statement. I honestly do want to ask this group if it's controversial to say Connecticut's racially and economically segregated, because I think that's all why we're here, I thought, was the charge, to address that. And I think doing some language here is a baseline part of the charge, just the reality that we live in. I also think, Francis, your point, I think it's a bit of a straw man argument to suggest that anyone is suggesting that form-based code is this kind of end all be all, or that zoning by itself is this. So as I've said, it's not. And I don't think that's a reflection of this group. And I don't think it's a reflection of the process itself. It's simply saying that this exists, this working group exists, this legislation exists to address this particular problem. It is one tool of many, but certainly from acknowledging the baseline reality that we got here is very important. I think to earlier comments about controversy or not, let's be real, it's no fault of anybody on this group, but this is not a representative group of folks in Connecticut that have been impacted presently or in past by zoning laws, redlining, or other land use regimes that are segregatory. I think it's controversial for a group like ours not acknowledging that in a state report as a baseline as well. So I think I recognize where people are coming from in good faith of worrying about scope creep. I think this revised language acknowledges the impact of these laws and the purpose that we are looking to get past this and think about past mistakes to do future work. I think it's an overview that's pretty historically defensible, and plenty of data from state government reports would back that. So I think this compromise revision would alleviate the concerns that we're being reckless and not discussing this history, but not overly prescribe or otherwise. But to be honest, I'm not worried about making somebody uncomfortable if they don't agree with the consensus that we live in an economically and racially segregated state. That's not an audience that we can reach with this, but in terms of offering a multitude of tools to solve these core problems, this is one of those tools and one of those times and places. And I think acknowledging why we're here to do that makes a lot of sense. And I think this is a good revision to tone down the language a little bit and further that larger context that we're trying to get, accomplished in the broader scheme of all of this.
Thanks, Pete. Steve.
Thanks. Two quick points. I think if this is going to be included, I think we should take, and I don't want to prolong this by any stretch, but take a more global look at what other issues along those same lines, like climate change, should be included as well. Second point is I am concerned about alienating someone, because in several of the other discussions we had about the target audience for this, for these smaller communities who don't, we spent a lot of time talking about these smaller communities who don't have the staff and or the tools to implement a form-based code, for example. If that's the target audience and you're going to have this language in here, I could see those individuals that, based on what the demographics are talking about, immediately not responding to that based on the language you're in there. It's almost accusatory in some sense. So I think you just have to be careful about this. I think that larger communities that have the tools, they kind of acknowledge this and deal with that in their present policies, but other communities might not. And I think you risk alienating them and having them ignore what you're putting forth to begin with.
Steve, do you feel that way even with this revised language, which I think is it's just got this recognition of economic and racial segregation almost as a statement of, just the current state, that's particularly controversial to some people to accept that?
No, I don't think they would necessarily disagree with that, but I think it's like, it's been repeated over and over and over. And I think it's, this is just my opinion, it's been a cause for divisiveness now. It's almost been used as a tool on one side or the other against the argument. So that's my only worry with it.
Pete?
Oh, sorry, that's just from previous.
Okay, sorry. So
yeah, Greg, I want to get to the folks that haven't gotten.
Yeah, Greg? I'm just trying to go through the list. Yeah. So Greg, you're next.
Thanks. So just real quick, we all come from what type of work we do, and being a lawyer, I look and we haven't really built the record sort of on some of these points, and I also look at the charge a little bit. So it's really, I look at the word acknowledges is maybe not being the right word. I would suggest that it's the working group has concern or words like that. I think it's better used here than acknowledges.
Francis. You're on mute, sorry.
I think that's a great suggestion, that language adjustment there. And I also, just to emphasize what I said before, I think we should not present our recommendations as necessarily a solution to, because if you actually have to face communities, in many cases, they are exceedingly white and high income, whereas down the street, you can find Euclidean zone, predominantly minority neighborhoods. We see if you look at what's happening with a lot of form-based codes, you see a lot of these luxury condo complexes where all of the amenities are behind a key swipe door. It's actually arguably even more exclusionary than conventional Euclidean zoning. So if we are going to put this in here, then we perhaps need to think more about what our recommendations are. Charge was not to address these issues. Our charge was to look at form-based codes and make recommendations about how to implement them. And we really haven't addressed these other points. So that is my concern about putting this in here, not just a lack of consistency, but also raising potentially false expectations.
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt. Francis, that just isn't true about form-based codes or about there being more exclusionary. It just simply isn't true. The facts do not back it up. I'll be happy to talk to you about this offline, but that I don't want that to be.
Leslie, I'm not saying all form-based codes. I'm saying this is the case in some developments that are form-based.
No, they're not form-based. They're developer-based. That is not how form-based code works. You can apply, form-based code is a tool and it can be used well, it can be used poorly. Euclidean zoning is a tool, it can be used well, it can be used poorly. You have completely misrepresented what form-based code is.
No, I agree it's a tool too. I'm saying the exact same thing. It does not necessarily result in this. It can be as exclusionary if it's not used appropriately.
To argue that it's the only one that has included, and it isn't going to be clear, it is not going to solve all the problems. And I have said that before. I have offered that cautionary comment many times. But I'm be careful how you classify things. It will not fix everything, but what it does do is that it specifically allows for the ability to house people of all incomes, all races. It takes into consideration the idea of having more concentrated areas and less concentrated areas. And the goal of it is to define, in part, to define the public realm. It's actually to define the piece of space that everybody gets to occupy by right.
So Leslie, I don't think Francis is suggesting that we don't move forward with recommendations for model-based codes. I think the focus is on the language of the third paragraph. I don't want this to become a debate on specific to what the problems of form. So I think we can all agree that form-based codes are not a panacea to solve all the problems. That like you said, and I think that was acknowledged, it's a tool. Ben?
Thanks. So I'm not entirely sure the stakes are as high as the length of the discussion would imply. I think that in other words, I think if the language were not there, I think this would still be a good report. But I also think that the language, particularly as amended, does a really good job of putting what we're doing in some context. And I think context is helpful for the audience that it will be presented to. And I think ignoring this context, which I agree is, certainly from my view, is pretty inarguable truth about the impacts of some zoning policies have had, is helpful for decision makers. But I really want to kind of get back to what Representative Maddox noted, and I thought that I had some of those same concerns about some of the earlier drafts of the language. I don't think it is helpful to be overly provocative on language that's going to turn people off. But I got to say, having gone through the 24-hour hearing that eventually led to this, the very fact of the state doing anything with zoning is a red flag for a lot of these municipalities. Even what we've done is going to be considered controversial to some, and I don't think we can do anything about that. And I think that the best way to address that is through education and just advocacy for what is a good objective report. So I don't want that fear of sort of unreasonable objections to prevent us from trying to do the best job we can. And I will say, back to sort of what Pete said, I think this language is just good context, a good introduction, and should be put in. One other thing I do want to note, though, is that, again, as a subcommittee of and I forget the rankings now, how many subcommittee of a subcommittee, I think. We don't know what other groups are putting in, and it is at least possible that similar contextual language will be placed in the full report. And if it becomes duplicative, that might be an issue. So my recommendation would be certainly to add this language in, as is on the screen, but be sort of cognizant of the full package, that it may turn out to be repetitive, and worthy of looking at it. People should be willing to look at it again if again there is some of that greater context in the final document, the full document.
So Ashley, is it December 1st that is our next meeting of the full commission?
The next full commission meeting is December 5th.
6th?
5th.
5. I use, okay. So that's that Monday, the 5th.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a good point, Ben, that, what's going to happen in the sort of the overall document. And I know that there's duplication here between us, and I think that there's like a housing working group or something like that. So I think there's going to be other areas where there's this intersection of ideas, and I don't really know how the final documents, if it's simply like, oh, let's take this working group and this working group and all paste them together and there's the report, or that there's some, the co-chairs of the group actually go about and try to meld this all together into one comprehensive readable document. That would be the ideal. Whether that happens or not, I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see. But let's move on. Is that all right, Ben? Or do you have any other further comments? You're back on mute.
Sorry,
so
I'd already muted myself. Now I'm done.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ben. Caroline?
Yeah, I think the Mervis's revised language is interesting and can work, but I think that when we make this the sole reason why we're doing this, or what, by that I mean that someone brought up the point about what about climate change or other ways that this may help towns. I think by putting it out there as the one main reason that we're doing this, it does then, even though the language feels very not divisive, it can lead to division. I mean, the fact that we're just discussing all this amongst ourselves and create a division amongst ourselves about this, we're going to see the same thing when these codes are adopted. So I think the more we can not create any sort of division, the better. So we could maybe just keep this language, but list it as one of several things that form-based codes can do. So form-based codes may help with this, they can help with this and this and this. So, which is sort of a point I brought up even before in the email exchanges, even before we were talking about this, is that I don't think this document in general does a good job of showing how these form-based codes can be helpful. And all it might need is, sorry, there's a cat. All it might need is a listing of kind of some practical examples of where form-based code has been successful and what it can do. And maybe as part of that, we include how it can help in the area of affordable housing, kind of spin it in a more positive way. So it doesn't have this kind of divisive overtones. And also if we kind of put it in a group of things, it won't seem as if this is the main sole reason we're doing this. That's point number one. And then the last point is that, I don't think we want people to adopt these codes based on the past history of racism. I think we want them to adopt these codes for positive reasons. And while we can acknowledge that, I think we really have to put a positive side to it too and say, this is what it can do to address that, rather than, in specific terms, so that people seeing this can understand it, and not just people who are really well versed in form-based codes. And that's it. We just have to remember that this isn't about us. This is about the many communities that are going to be adopting this. And we have to think about how best to do that. I mean, if we list segregation and and our policy turns people off, we've done nothing towards addressing the problem, and we're just as at fault for that. So we really have to be careful about how we present this is what I would say.
Thank you, Caroline. Pete?
Thank you. Yeah, so I've read and reread the enabling section for this working group a number of times in Public Act 2129. And I, for the life of me, cannot find anything other than presenting a report on recommendations on how towns may use form-based codes. So I do think that the social commentary, putting aside whether it's valid or not valid, there are other social commentaries that could be added here. Climate change was one. We have demographic issues with respect to how form-based codes may help young people, retirees. We haven't addressed that. We haven't addressed economic development and how form-based codes might affect economic development of towns. So there are a whole bunch of other issues. And I just think, this is, and I understand the proponents' point here in presenting this, but I don't think we should be under any illusions that as the various working groups present their reports to the steering committee or to the commission itself, I don't think we're the commission, we're the working group of a commission.
That's right.
All these issues are not novel. I am sure they'll be considered in a greater context. I just don't see the purpose, particularly under the enabling section, to include language that's extraneous to the mission of this group.
Thank you, Peter. Bob?
Yes, so a suggestion in reading this, someone mentioned earlier too, the first sentence on Marissa's revision, and I don't mean it, I don't think it's meant to be that way, but it could be by some people interpreted as being accusatory. So what I just put in the chat, let's see if I can hit chat, was a suggestion to just be uplifting versus that, to say model codes in Connecticut should offer municipalities guidance in developing affordable housing, reducing racial inequality, and managing climate change. I mean, I think that's what people think model code should do. So let's concentrate on solutions from there.
So I got a comment. Bob, I appreciate the statement in general until we get to managing climate change, and only because I'm an advocate, and
Right.
I'm very much part of this discussion, but it's
Right.
in a different place, and it's getting tremendous support from this administration.
Right.
I
don't disagree.
even where we're talking now, DEEP is proposing, I don't know how far they'll get with it, to allow municipalities a stretch energy code that to allow
I'm all on board for it. Yes, as you know, on my other calls. I just simply bring this up that I guess my own suggestion is that we could either head in this direction or say nothing. It's one or the other. Either say something that's uplifting, but not just sit there and say that the only hammer we want to go and nail and solve is racial inequality. And I don't disagree. It is a problem. So is affordable housing. So are outrageous energy prices. Wait till January when your power bill goes up, 50%. And managing climate change. So, I'm also comfortable with the previous speakers' thoughts of being silent on the issue. I sort of just offer this as a suggestion that to try to reach full consensus. That's all.
Steve.
I put a couple of comments in the chat. I agree with Robert and Caroline. I think if you added some language about the the other benefits of the form-based code where it leads to certainty for the developers. You know what the community wants. It can reduce cost, can aid in increasing affordable housing. I think if you add those things and include the language that we already have, I think that answers both issues.
Matthew.
My apologies for being late. I had this as noon, not 11 o'clock. I'm glad we're still here and talking. I sent an email yesterday. I sit on the Affordable Housing Committee, and we had a similar discussion on how we were going to deal with the situation and how we got to the need for affordable housing. And what it ultimately came down to was we're here to solve the problem, not explain why we got here. And that report is going to come out listing all of the reasons that we need affordable housing, but not why we got there. And the reason being, so we decided that we didn't want to be antagonistic to municipalities. We didn't want to do any finger pointing. And the best way to do it is to look forward. And that's exactly what Robert just said. We're supposed to be doing something inviting, something that will have people want to go forward and create the model code or create affordable housing. This language there is basically indicting state, federal government, the towns that were looking to do things. I think it should be removed. I don't want to add language to it to try to ameliorate it. It's not our place to be making such a political comment. Also, nothing later on in our report even talks about it, excuse me, doesn't even talk about how to create affordable housing. There's nothing in it. And so the point is that form-based code itself, come on, sorry guys, phones. Nothing in the affordable municipal, excuse me, let me get my head together again. Form-based code does not actually create affordable housing. It just creates housing. And whether or not it's affordable or not is up to the municipality to then mandate some kind of inclusionary practice to make it happen. So we're in two worlds here. We're trying to create affordable housing, but we're not mandating that it's part of the form-based code. I, for one, do not want to be making political statements. I think we should just be moving forward and offering the overall commission and the municipalities a way forward to create the housing that they need. So that's my part. Let me ask a question. Did we talk about the list of resources at all in the prior part of this meeting?
No, I'm
No?
not sure what you mean, Matthew.
Well, we got, 10, 15 paragraphs of stuff, and then we've got 30 links that come out of it that we're calling the resources. Did we discuss those links at all?
No.
We have not. Okay, so there are two links that I think, again, are slightly problematic. It's the first link that comes out, let me get the exact wording of it, the Clearinghouse for Form-Based Code Information. That links directly to Desegregate Connecticut. We should be avoiding bringing in political organizations to what we're doing. It should be take their list that they have below on that page and integrate those links into our links rather than going to Desegregate Connecticut and having a political organization. I think that's problematic. We should just be, here's a straight up list of things that are important for people to utilize without drilling down into the politics of anything. We're supposed to be a nonpartisan body, not trying to move people a particular way, other than saying form-based code is a reasonable thing for municipalities to do. And the third one, webinar form-based codes, is a Desegregate Connecticut seminar. So again, if we can find the same thing, the information's not wrong. It's just that which organization's saying it. I think that we would be doing a better service overall by staying nonpartisan and just delivering the information. So those are my 2 points. One, I think we should remove that paragraph. It's really not helpful. It's only going to create controversy. It is creating controversy here. And staying out of politics and not pointing to specific organizations and having them tell people rather than us tell people. So those are my 2 points.
Thank you, Matthew. Marissa, I want to give you sort of the last word here, since you gave us this language initially, and there's been some other changes here suggested that we could talk about. But we have to get this to closure.
Yep.
Until this has to be closed out today. So however we handle this.
Well, I think, this is a group, we're working together. So ultimately it has to be something that a majority of us are comfortable with. And I do agree with the comment though, that this conversation maybe is not as high stakes as indicated by the amount of attention on it. But I think that, from my perspective, I still think it's important that we include this context, as Ben described it, this context that's laid out in that first sentence of my rewrite. And I think, offering that the model codes are a tool that municipalities can use is a good point to include. And maybe I think there was some earlier language, offering that this is just a tool. There's limitations as well. Obviously can't do everything. So I'm still for including this language.
How do you feel, Marissa, about the language that Bob had put forward and Steve had amended or appended? It does, again, it says it doesn't carry the same sort of strength and impact of your original statements. However, it includes discussion about racial inequality. I don't see that as being highly controversial. I mean, life is controversial, but this offers and it extends it to talk about other goals of the form-based code discussion, which is about facilitating development, reducing development costs. Those are all very much part of this. So how do you feel about this statement in lieu of the other statements?
I think that I think it's okay, though I do still think it's important to include the context that was outlined in the first sentence of the rewrite on the top there. So I'd be in favor of keeping the first statement or doing a combination of the two.
Okay. How about this? I don't really know. Okay, Steve, last comment. Go ahead.
Thanks. I think you could leave the first part of it and then just add the other text. You could make the argument that the Connecticut's zoning policies have led to all these other issues in terms of increased affordability, climate issues, increased permitting costs, whatever. I think you could apply that to all those if you wanted to.
How does this statement now, I'm going to remove Bob's name from this since it's now moved beyond that. Is this what we're talking about? I scratched out managing climate change because I just think that we're good. It is sort of from a scope standpoint, it's an important piece that's being discussed heavily in many other places. And I think we just need to, I recognize everybody's comments here. So we're not going to get 100% consensus on this, right? But I almost want to get reactions maybe to this if we're ready to go there. We've talked about this. So how about that? Reactions.
I don't know if you see my hand up.
Carol, I think we need to get reactions at this point. I think we got to call.
Oh, that's what you meant by reactions? Oh, okay.
How do you want us to react?
Yeah,
I would say if you are in favor of the statement, I guess a thumbs up would be helpful.
Couldn't you just combine the two sentences, like further this working group is concerns that local zoning policies have reinforced the patterns of economic and racial segregation, led to, and then just take the second piece of that, increase the cost of housing, including, the permitting, facilitating desired development, and, add that as one sentence, then you're just not highlighting one and you're including all of them as issues.
Yeah, and I think I think we're close enough that we can all come to an agreement to make this work without it being that we need a consensus or not, because again, like what I'd say is that we're showing a lot of division here, and we're just going to create division at other levels, and it doesn't make sense for us to be divided in any way. I think we're close enough that we can all come together and figure out a way to make this work where we're addressing some of the issues, but we're also not making it seem that we're, beating people over the head with it, which it comes across now because it's the only thing we're really bringing up.
Okay, so I'm trying to do this in real time here.
Why don't we take the time and come back with a statement that we
There's
can
no
all-
time. There is no time. This has to be done, and it has to be done today.
Wait, I got a question. Why does it have to be done today? The Affordable Housing Committee is not delivering its report by December 1st. We're taking our time and making sure that it's done correctly, and going to say to the commission when they meet, we're almost there, we're getting there, and something will be coming forward. I don't believe that the deadline that was put in is a hard deadline. I think that we have time to massage this. This paragraph obviously is problem enough for a number of people to spend time on it, that we shouldn't just, cut and paste stuff that some of us are still uncomfortable with because there's some deadline that may be artificial at this time.
All deadlines are artificial at some level, but as the co-chair of this working group, I feel like if I don't deliver, then I'm not doing my job. And I don't know how else to put it. I don't want to punt on it, basically. I think that if we can just take a moment, unless somebody else has already done this for me in the chat and I'm not seeing it, nope.
Well, I for one, do not want to be indicting my community, saying that things that they've done have been racial in the past. I don't believe that's the case. And for it to be in there, I have a problem. The state and federal policy, we have a problem. There's a need for affordable housing. We don't actually address it in the rest of the body of our report. So here we're coming forward with something saying that here's the reason why there's a problem with racial inequality and affordable housing, yet we don't actually address it. We're just creating form-based code that may increase housing, but not necessarily affordability. So there's a disconnect why we're going down this road. I, for one, don't want it in here as it stands, and would rather just have that other one that Robert put up saying there's a need for affordable housing. We have a concern. We want to try to take care of it. Hopefully that form-based code will help solve the problem. I think that's a much broader and more positive and forward-thinking statement rather than indicting the past or communities that may not have been involved in this.
Matthew, you said you mentioned affordable housing. Are you opposed to the Bob's also line about reducing racial inequity?
I don't have a problem with racial inequity if we try to solve that. Yeah, I think that's fine. That was in Robert's language.
No, I understand that. To some extent, I'm failing to see the distinction between reducing racial inequity and acknowledging that there is racial inequity, which seems to me all that the first one is saying. And again, it concerns and pattern. I mean, again, I'm not really seeing the distinction. I agree with you that we want a positive message, but I'm not sure that, saying we're concerned that there's racial inequity and then we're going to do something about fixing racial inequity. I mean, and other stuff.
Well, one is an indictment of the state and federal policy saying that it's what created it and local policy created it. The other one is we can say, we believe that there is for a need for affordable housing, and there's racial inequality, and we hope that model code will be able to resolve that. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. I don't really want to be indicting people about the past. I think we should look at the present, and then we should look to see how we can fix it moving forward, not indicting or reaching out and making a political statement that way.
I understand. It does become the turtle on the fence post. It got there somehow. But again, I think that
maybe I should forward you the affordable housing's draft, so you can see what the Affordable Housing Committee, which is the one that actually is dealing with the concept of how to deal with creating affordable housing. This body is not looking to create affordable housing. This body is supposed to be creating form-based code so people can deal with it as they wish. So maybe that language, you can see how the other body that was actually charged to deal with the situation is dealing with it. It's not creating controversy, yet it's actually saying, yeah, we have a problem with the need for affordable housing. Let's address it. And here's all the reasons how to do it.
And again, I'm personally okay with sort of Robert's original language. I mean, I'm trying to find some common ground here, and I'm missing the vehemence on the first part. Okay, so again, I'm not, and I said before, I think this is all probably less important than we're making it. I don't think that this is the be all and end all that will solve the problem of one way or the other. So again, I'm trying to avoid to do another cliche, the perfect being the enemy of the good, or I just want, again, I think that Leslie's got her hand up. Like I said, I'm trying to get there, and I know David very much wants to be finished today, and I see the frustration. So, like I said, I think we all should try to figure out how do we help him get over that this final piece.
Yeah, so I did also want to say, I want to make one more point about, and then Leslie, the idea with model codes wasn't to address affordability in the same sense of like, structured, this is going to be 80% of the local housing cost, but to provide options at different scales to allow by nature housing that would provide options at different scales. And that's one of the things that, 2-acre zoning, when it's applied to, in broad areas of towns, doesn't do very well. And so the idea is that model codes can begin to address some of those concerns. I just think it's an important distinction to make, but Leslie, please.
David, thank you for that. It's absolutely right. But one other thing I'd like to add is that although a lot of our discussion has been on housing, our charge is a model code, and codes include all kinds of other things like signage and whether you have minimum parking requirements or not. Do you require street trees? I mean, there are a million other things that go toward making our communities, large or small, livable and healthy and friendly versus, obnoxious and in your face, as I recognize I may have been earlier. My apologies. So I think we need to remember that we're looking at providing model language or options for model language that address a vast array of things.
So I'm going to put this one up there as the I think it's either maybe this or nothing. I think the rest of the document hopefully is strong. I'm not willing to cut Desegregate Connecticut out of this discussion. They are represented here in this group. Reference to their website, I don't think is in and of itself controversial if the information, and I think that's what you said, that information is good. It was just the idea that going there period is a problem. I have a problem agreeing with that. All right, a couple more comments, Sean.
It's a question, David. Thank you first for your management of this conversation. I really appreciate it. But just in sort of the mechanics of this, the rest of the, in terms of how we're going to determine what language is or isn't included with this statement, of course, will need to be applied across the whole report, because I think if the standard is for one sentence or two sentences, is not the same for the rest of the report, I think we need to revisit the rest of the language, because I haven't read it with that eye. So I would like to say that I'd like to know what the standard is for this decision.
I don't follow, Sean.
How will we decide if one of these sentences is added, included in a report or not, is what I'm asking.
I'm suggesting that it's replacement language.
Right, but I'm saying, is it a consensus vote? Is it a majority vote? That comes down to how are you going to determine that this body, a non-representative body of the state, I want to remind people, if we can look at our images on Zoom, how are we going to decide what gets included in this body and this report? And my concerns about upsetting certain segment of the state are not as great as others. We need to recognize and put in context what land use policy does in this state. And many of us sitting in this meeting have not been impacted in that manner. And I hope that we can keep that in mind as we continue this conversation.
Okay, Caroline?
Yeah, I'm for like you said, a replacement of that sentence, and even if it needs to be made a little bit stronger on the issue of racial discrimination, a sentence or two, as long as it's kind of framed in a positive way, is as Bob was saying, is great. And then the next thing too, you mentioned just quickly that we're adding in Desegregate Connecticut's website, a link to that. Did I hear that correctly?
Been there all the time.
Yeah, and it's been there all the time. Well, then I didn't even notice that before. And that's the only website we're linking to. We're not linking to other members of other sources or anything.
This is in the document.
Yeah,
It's been there all the time.
I never
Every
noticed.
single
There's
live
a
link
list.
here.
There's a list
It's a
of all
list.
kinds of
Okay.
different.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just a resource list.
Oh, yeah,
It's
that's
not telling-
great. Oh, okay. I thought it was sort of in the body there. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, so I would go with what you're saying in terms of just swapping it out with a more positive spin.
I think to Sean's question, how do you determine that? I want to take a straw poll. And if it's like a 50-50, I don't feel confident putting it in there. And if it's a, 95-5, then that's a different thing. And I just don't really know right now until we sort of, get, so that's where we were before. Can we go back to that? Let me put that language back up there. We've been going back and forth on the language. So there's the very reduced, it mentions racial inequity, expedition of the permitting process, facilitating desired development, reducing development costs. These are some of the things that Steve had added in the chat function. So it's a fairly, I think, diluted from the original document here, which you can see is this longer paragraph, which understand is viewed and Ken was, I think, intentionally viewed to be controversial or provocative, let's say, maybe not controversial, but provocative.
I'd have just one maybe minor change to that option.
Yes.
If you could bring it back up.
Which one?
On the top there.
This one, yeah.
Yep, correct. So maybe we should stay away from affordable housing, since that is a specific defined
I agree.
category, and just say in developing housing or housing options or housing
I think
diversity.
housing options is really what I think why this group was put together, because there is the affordable housing working group.
David, just quickly, Do you think we should expand racial inequity to be racial/ethnic and economic?
I have no problem with that.
Yep.
I'm not sure isn't that the same? Racial and
I was
ethnic?
about to say,
No.
add financial. Absolutely.
Yeah, economic.
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 Yeah.
Economic. I don't know about ethnic. I think ethnic is racial.
So
It is not,
They're
I
different.
agree, including ethnicity.
Okay.
They are not the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. Just-
David, just add a comma, I think,
Yeah.
after racial.
Racial, yes.
Comma.
Believe it or not, when I write, typically for business purposes, I write, I rewrite, I reread, I rewrite, I rewrite. So there's some inherent danger, but
You could
and
take
if,
out
with
the
everybody's
last.
permission,
Yeah.
if we can get to some statement here, and if I have to add, or deal a little bit with grammatical changes, you'll give me permission to do so, but without affecting content. But anyhow, all right. How about this? I know we're well over time. We're half an hour past our stated time. Thumbs up for accepting the statement. I got 1, 2, 3,
Do the
4.
emoji so that he can count them all.
Yeah, please do the emoji, especially those are off camera.
It's under the reactions.
Okay, so how about the opposite? Can we get a,
9.
the crying face? What are the other emojis that would?
Pick one.
I can't even see them right now, unfortunately. So somebody pick what's the is there a negative?
Yeah, there's a crying one. That's a good one.
A
David.
crying
Use
face.
crying.
Any crying faces here? All right.
I think I'd be crying just based on, we've talked about this a half hour long.
Yeah.
That's a wear them down approach to group management. Okay, I'm going to include this. I'm going to substitute this statement in. Okay.
Okay.
Is that a clap, Greg?
Yeah, that's just me clapping.
Okay. All right, everybody. In a way, this was kind of fun, and I appreciate everybody's opinion and everybody's passion. And I think we all treated each other appropriately in a civil manner and to get to where we're at. And there's no good
typo. David, quick typo. In the second paragraph, you have though instead of through. You're missing an R in the second paragraph of the.
This is gone.
No, whole paragraph. Go back to the second paragraph of the whole concept. just before you go.
Back in here.
Yeah, back very top. Before you sign off, I thought you were trying to sign off. Just go back to the paragraph that says.
This right here, the Model Code Working Group.
Yeah, the Model Code Working Group recognizes blah, blah, blah. You said zoning ordinances, though development should be through development.
Second line of what you have highlighted.
Yeah.
Fourth word. There you go.
Okay. Okay. All right, stay with me here. Ah. All right, I'm not going to bother everybody here. I'll get this paragraph in here. Thanks, everybody. Have a terrific Thanksgiving. I respect and appreciate everybody's input.
Thank you. Too. Thanks.
Bye.
How do I leave?
Thanks,
Ashley,
David.
oh, you're welcome. Ashley, you want to stay on for a second?
Yeah, I'm right here, Dave.
All right.
Hold on.
I'm a little exhausted, but that's okay.
Right. Yeah, that was a lot.
All right. So I'm just going to put this thing together. I'll add that work in. What do I do? Remove draft, leave draft in? Is this a draft report still?
So we want it as close to complete as done, like as much as you guys can get in, as good as you guys feel about all of it collectively. That's what we're looking for. If it still needs tweaks as the months go on, it's okay.
All right. I mean, you've seen some of the other committees. How are we doing?
You guys are doing really well. I have other groups that they can't even agree. Like you guys are agreeing on things. They're not even agreeing on their draft as it is right now.
Yeah. I hope I wasn't I just in terms of not not coming to conclusion and just sort of kicking the can. I didn't feel good about that.
Yeah,
So
it
all right.
becomes futile after a while. So I
All
think
right.
it's definitely, we're moving in the right direction.
Okay. Well, that'll be that.
Okay.
Have a great Thanksgiving.